A rough running engine like this one can ruin your day pretty quickly, but it's important to understand why it's doing it because it doesn't happen for no reason. And if you've been there before, you know how frustrating it is. The first thing I do with a running condition is I plug in my scan tool, at least a code reader, so I can see what the computer has to say. If there's a check engine light, there's a code to read, and usually it'll point you in the right direction. It's not the answer, but it's a clue. Cycling through our codes, we can see several. Some we can ignore at least for now, but we'll keep them in the back of our mind. And cylinder 4 misfire is the one that we're after. This tells me the computer has already pinpointed a problem in that cylinder. It's having a hard time keeping up with the rest of them. So now it's our time to do some investigation. And like I mentioned, this isn't the answer, this is just a clue. And we'll have to find out why it's having a hard time keeping up. It's important to remember before taking parts off what the engine needs to run properly. It needs air, fuel, ignition or spark, and it needs compression inside the cylinder. If one of those things is not there, or at least not up to par, it's not going to fire properly. So to start, I want to give it a visual inspection as is before I touch anything, just in case I maybe find something that's unplugged or broken, something more superficial that might cause similar symptoms. In my case, everything looks great, except for some engine oil on the top of the valve cover, which I think is just from people spilling after filling the engine with oil and not cleaning up after themselves. It is what it is. You don't always have to do this, but in this case, we have to move some components aside to get to the parts we need to inspect. Now, whether you need ignition components, fuel delivery components, or even air filters, check us out at oneauto.com and get your engine running nice and smooth again. One thing I noticed right away as soon as I pulled this intake off and I could see is that ignition coil on cylinder number 4 is different. So that tells me somebody's already been in here trying to fix an issue. Maybe they were just hoping an ignition coil would be the solution to this problem. Clearly it's not, because it's still running very poorly, but at this point I would want to remove all the ignition coils, inspect their electrical connectors, which is one of the ways they can stop functioning in. If it's broken, corroded, or melted, that's a big issue. These are all fine. And ignition coils themselves can fail in a few ways. They can be cracked right up top here, swollen, maybe down where they go into the tube they can be damaged. The boot can be swollen from oil. This one particularly is absolutely soaked in oil, so clearly there was some oil spillage here. Now, it can also fail without any visual signs. If it's just dead, then, well, it's not gonna send a spark to the spark plug and therefore not fire the engine properly. When inspecting the spark plugs, you're looking for obvious visible damages, such as the tip being broken. Maybe it's worn out completely, which actually would be a normal life cycle of a spark plug. Maybe the porcelain is cracked, or maybe it's just full of buildup, such as carbon, or if the engine is burning coolant on that cylinder, it would have a lot of white, crusty buildup on it. What you see here is actually a typical looking used spark plug. There's nothing really visually wrong with it. I have a 4-cylinder engine here, so of course I'm going to go over all 4 ignition coils and spark plugs, and I'm going to even compare them to each other, because sometimes if they look different significantly, that's a clue as to something going on in a particular cylinder, the one that's different. At this point, you're probably wondering why I haven't mentioned the air yet, and that is for this particular reason. I wanted to have the intake out so I can show you why. It's not just about the air filter when it comes to airflow in the engine. Of course, it has to get measured by the mass airflow sensor if your vehicle has one, but then it enters this area where nothing can change, especially past the throttle body. You can't add, or you can't take away or restrict any of the airflow, or it will not run properly. And that is what I wanted to show here. These 4 red gaskets that you see are intake manifold gaskets. They seal up against the engine. If any of these are swollen and they don't seal up anymore, or they're cracked and they don't seal up anymore, or maybe they're so old they have flattened out and therefore are letting air through, well, that's going to have excess air come in through the gaskets, or I guess in between the gasket and the engine, and then enter the cylinder, but that's not measured. So that's gonna make the engine run horribly rough because it has air that it didn't account for. And all of a sudden, the balance of fuel and air is no longer accurate. Pinpointing a bad injector is usually a little more difficult because you can't turn them on or, crank the vehicle and watch them spray fuel all over the place. That would be unsafe and not a great idea. So you want to avoid doing that, of course, but you can look for visual cues, such as if they're broken, damaged, cracked, or if the plug, the connector to them, is not in working order, or maybe not even plugged in. What you can also do is measure the resistance of each injector with a multimeter and look up the specification for that vehicle. Of course, if it's outside of that specified range, the injector is bad and it needs to be replaced. Fuel delivery to the injectors, though, that's the easier part to diagnose because you can put a gauge on it, or you could just watch a scan tool that maybe reads off of a pressure sensor, and you can see how much fuel is being delivered. If it's good, it's good. If it's not good, there's a restriction somewhere. The last thing that remains undiscussed is compression. That needs to be equal between all cylinders with about a 10% difference. That's acceptable. It's never going to be identical between all of them, especially on a worn engine, but it should be close, because if it's not, that means something mechanical has gone wrong in the engine, whether it's timing related, so maybe your chain or belt has stretched, has broken, has skipped a tooth, or inside the cylinder, whether it's the valves or the piston, something is broken or damaged to the point where it can't seal up anymore and squeeze that air and fuel mixture to make the power you're looking for. So the next time you have a running condition, remember to keep it simple and think logically. Pull the codes, and then you want to check the affected cylinder for air, spark, fuel, and hopefully you don't have to check for compression, but you never know. Regardless, one of those four things is either not there or not up to par, so once you fix that, you can get your engine running smoothly again.